Howdy, Ags. Welcome to the July Luncheon. It's taken on a little bit of a different shape this luncheon. We were at the Association of Former Students back in March before COVID. Then we wound up at the Embassy Suites, and now we're here virtually on Facebook and YouTube. So it's been quite a turn of events. I hope you're tuning in and watching. We've got an excellent speaker in Mr. Dan Rudge from the Bryan-College Station Metropolitan Planning Organization. We don't have too many updates from the club's perspective. We're planning a ton of events for the fall that are kind of in limbo right now because of COVID, but we hope that you and your families are staying safe and healthy, and we hope to be together, not only be together soon, but to be back in action and having some Aggie football here in the fall. I think it's going to be a great fall, and I hope all of us are able to be together and join in together for different events. So without further ado, we'll pass it over to Mr. Dan Rudge. Dan had joined the Bryan-College Station Metropolitan Planning Organization as its executive director. Dan has 25 years of experience in the transportation planning profession and worked in 6 different states, primarily Virginia and Florida. He, prior to joining the DRPT, which is the Virginia Department of Rail and Public Transportation, Dan was the executive director of the Springfield, Missouri Metropolitan Planning Organization. His responsibilities included managed oversight as well as project oversight for all of the transportation improvement programs and development of the regional rideshare program, including all the Safe Routes to School initiative. Prior to being the executive director, Dan worked with 3 other MPOs and has written long-range transportation plans, congestion management process plans, coordinated human service agency plans, transit development plans, and transportation demand management plans. Dan was also a research associate with the Center for Urban Transportation Research in Florida, where he was involved in planning and implementation of transportation demand management programs, technical assistance to municipalities, integrating alternative transportation or transit into local growth management initiatives, developing citizen participation programs, and developing strategic plans for public and private sector organizations. Dan's other activities include serving as a project planner for the State Transportation Policy Initiative, land use regulations that support access management, and various transit development plans. Dan's also received national recognition for developing and conducting 16 to 40-hour transportation training seminars in 9 different states, and co-authoring 2 award-winning transportation handbooks and editing an international newsletter. So if that wasn't enough, but Dan also holds a master's degree in urban and regional planning from Virginia Commonwealth University and a bachelor's of arts degree from Virginia Tech. So we have an incredible speaker to tell us all about the transportation needs of Bryan-College Station and what's happening. Without further ado, Mr. Dan Rudge.
Thank you for that introduction. Before I begin, I just want to make sure everybody can see my slideshow. So if somebody would acknowledge that they can see it, I'll begin.
I think we can see it, yeah.
Can everybody hear me and see my screen? Hello. Is there anybody there?
Dan, you won't get a response. Just go ahead and start. Everybody can see you. You're good.
Okay, thanks. So one of the things I like to do when I begin this presentation is really kind of tell people what is an MPO. So MPO stands for Metropolitan Planning Organization. Congress did something they probably wouldn't do today, and that's part of the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1962. They said, you know, it would kind of be a good idea if local transportation issues were determined locally instead of here in Congress. So they mandated that MPOs be formed, and they provide all of the funding for the policy-making organization. They're required in all urbanized areas with a population of 50,000 or more. Based on the delay from the census, the one in Bryan-College Station was formed in 1974. The board has to be made up of local government representatives. So I have Commissioner Nancy Berry, Mayor Carl Mooney, Councilman Brent Hairston, and then I also have representatives from TTI, Dr. Bill Stockton, and the Bryan District Engineer, who is Lance Simmons. So that's my 5 bosses who I get along well with, so that's always a good thing. MPOs are required to follow what's called a continuing cooperative and comprehensive planning process. And that's just continuing means that we're constantly examining what it is we're planning and what we're programming. It's cooperative in that we work with local governments through their representatives and with citizens. And it's comprehensive in that we don't just look at roadways, we look at roadways, transit, freight, railroads, Greyhound bus, a variety of modes goes into everything that we look at. And as part of that process, all of the documents that I prepare all have to match. So I have a Metropolitan Transportation Plan. The Transportation Improvement Program has to include projects only that were in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. And then we have a variety of other things that we do that all have to match. So it's following a 3C planning process. What I was asked to talk to you about today is really what we can kind of look forward to in terms of transportation projects in the Bryan-College Station area over the next 5 years. So the first project that will get underway is FM 2818 between University Drive and Welburn Road. Now, originally we talked about widening the road to 6 lanes and just kind of leaving it at that with some raised medians and some bicycle and pedestrian facilities. But instead, we've kind of gone with what's called a super street design. And I'll have a better drawing of what that looks like in a second. All of the construction documents were completed. The project is expected to go to bid in August or September, and then construction will start either in November or December of this year. We used to worry about getting projects started in November because of football season, but with the pandemic, we don't know if that will be a concern or not. So what are we doing on 2818? Well, if you look at on the left of the screen, what we call a traditional intersection, and pretend in this case that it's the intersection of 2818 and Holloman. You actually have 32 spots in that intersection where you have potential conflict points where you can have accidents. We are moving towards a design that looks like the one here on the right, which is a restricted crossing U-turn pattern. And I'll show you what that looks like at at Holloman in a second. But you can see we cut down the number of conflict points by more than half by doing a R-cut.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dan. I don't think you're sharing the right screen. We have your PowerPoint presentation, but not the actual slideshow. We have the base PowerPoint.
Okay, I thought I was sharing. That's not you don't have the full screen look?
No, sir.
Okay, because it's full screen on my screen. Let's see. Do you have any suggestions on how I give you the full screen?
You should be able to just open back up the Chrome tab and hit reshare. Yes, sir.
Reshare?
Yeah, just hit share screen again and.
Now, can you see full screen now?
No, sir. I would just use it out of the main PowerPoint window.
Okay. So if you look at what we're trying to do, this is what's called a restricted crossing U-turn design. And so as we move through the that was what I was afraid of. If you look at Holloman, pretend that the one on the right is Holloman Drive. If you wanted to go straight across on Holloman, you'll no longer be allowed to do that. Instead, you'll make a right-hand turn and then proceed down 2818 for a little while, and then make a U-turn. And same thing with some of with Holloman going in the opposite direction. The only turns that will be allowed will be left-hand turns off of 2818 onto Holloman Drive. Same thing will happen at Luther and probably Bush. And again, the reason for that is because we're reducing the number of conflict points. But if you look at it in terms of delay time, if we just added an additional lane in each direction, so we had 3 lanes in each direction, the amount of delay at Holloman would go from 164 seconds to about 123 seconds and would exceed 164 seconds within 5 years. By going to this R-cut type of intersection, we end up reducing that down to 42 seconds. So that's the reason why the super street was selected. And as you can see, one of the advantages of doing the super street is that if we ever make 2818 into a freeway, then the super street can be transformed into frontage roads for 2818. The next project that we're looking at is FM 158, which is William J. Bryan between Business Route 6, Texas Avenue, and State Highway 6. It is a very interesting project in that they are installing raised medians and pedestrian facilities, but they're doing more than that. And what I thought I'd do is I'd share with you the really busy area of the program. This is the park, and you can see they're adding roundabouts on both ends of the park. They're adding traffic signals here at Coulter, and then these other lights that you see are actually pedestrian beacons. And so if people want to cross the street to get to the park, they can actually hit the beacon, and the light may turn red or it may flash yellow to warn drivers that there are pedestrians or bicyclists in the area. Now, we had to break up William J. Bryan Parkway into several different segments. If you'd like to look at each one of the segments, you may do so. Just go to wjb.com, and all of the designs for each one of the segments on the roadway is available at that website. All of the designs were driven by citizen comment, and so the citizens told us what they wanted, what was important. We came back with some design drawings, and they said, yep, this is what we're looking for on William J. Bryan. So it's an intent to improve bicycle and pedestrian safety, to kind of slow folks down through some of the residential areas, and still make the road function during rush hour. So I think probably the project you're all most interested in is going to be the State Highway 6 project. And that will run from State Highway 21 in the north all the way down to William Fitch, or State Highway 40 in the south. We'll be widening it from 4 to 6 lanes. And we are very thankful that the Texas Transportation Commission decided this was an important project, because we receive about $13 million a year in funding for projects in Brazos County. And so we put the full $13 million on State Highway 6 and said, we'll do what we can with it. And the Texas Transportation Commission said, no, $13 million doesn't cover it. So here's another $161 million to help you make the project become a reality. To give you an idea of what it will eventually look like, here is State Highway 6 after construction. So we'll focus in a little bit on this area in a second. But what I wanted to show you is that some of the frontage roads will actually have 3 lanes where they're necessary. In this particular drawing, we're showing a bike lane, but after consulting with bicyclists and pedestrians, They didn't like the idea of having a bike lane on a frontage road with a speed greater than 35 miles per hour. So instead, we're going to widen the shared use path on the outside to give them a little bit bigger buffer. And then that way bicyclists and pedestrians can use that path. So we're taking the 3 feet that we would use for the bike lane and adding a couple of feet to the shared use path. As we scroll in a little closer to State Highway 6, you'll notice that we have 6 lanes of traffic on the main lanes, 3 in each direction. And then we have these things that we are calling distributor collector roads. During the process of developing the designs for State Highway 6, we realized that most people, based on our traffic analysis, only get on State Highway 6 for about 2 miles when they're in Bryan-College Station. And they may only be going 1 or 2 exits. So what the distributor collector lanes allows you to do is to get down below the frontage road, so you don't have to go through all of the traffic lights at each one of the intersections, and still be able to get off at your exit without actually having to move all the way over onto the main lanes. And I know that's a little difficult to visualize, so this is kind of what it looks like in other parts of Texas. You can see the main lanes are off to the left side of the picture, and then you have the collector distributors that allow you to either bypass the traffic signals at the intersections, allow you to travel down 1 or 2 exits and get off without getting on the main lanes, or further down, swing over and get onto the main lanes and go a longer distance. And so with this kind of a design, it provides much greater safety. It reduces the congestion on the main lanes, and it provides a better driving experience for everybody that is trying to access State Highway 6. We do have one location on State Highway 6 where the last time we did traffic counts, we had a traffic count in excess of 93,000 vehicles a day. To give you an idea, the only other locations in the state of Texas that have 93,000 vehicles a day are in Houston, Dallas, Austin, and San Antonio on roadways that are at least 6 lanes in each direction. So you can see why we had to make the improvements to deal with congestion on State Highway 6. The last project that I wanted to get to in any kind of depth was the George Bush, Wellburn, grade separation, urban interchange. We placed about $5 million of MPO funding on that project, and the other $64 million will eventually come from the Texas Transportation Commission. Unfortunately, we had this thing called a pandemic, and as a result, the revenues that were anticipated by the Texas Transportation Commission have dropped significantly. And so, as you'll see in a little bit when I show you the timing for these projects, this project is going to slide for a little while until we get around to, until the money becomes available and we can get around to it. So kind of what would this interchange look like? This is the below ground concept for Bush-Wellburn. This was the one that we did several public hearings, met with lots of local community organizations and citizen groups, and they told us that they preferred a below ground concept as opposed to a bunch of flyover lanes. And so you can see the arrow here is pointing towards Bluebell Park, and the existing McDonald's is here, and Aggieland Outfitters is over here. So if you're on Bush-Wellburn, your descent will begin, and you will go under both the Union Pacific Railroad tracks and under Wellburn Road to come to the intersection with Wellburn. And then once if you're staying on Bush, you'll just continue back up on the other side and come out about where the subway is located on Bush. If you're on Welburn, you'll be able to bypass the intersection completely on an elevated segment. And if you want to get on Bush, you'll go down into the below ground concept, and there'll be a signalized intersection here, and you'll either be able to make the left or the right to get on Bush, and the same thing with Bush to get on Welburn, either going south or going north. Now, there are a couple of interesting things that are in this drawing. One is, as you can see, the McDonald's loses its driveway to George Bush. Every time we work with a property owner or business owner that's losing a driveway, it's usually a very tense standoff for us. And when we went to meet with the McDonald's owner, his comment was 95% of the people that come to my McDonald's walk in from these apartments over here, and so I don't mind losing my driveway. We weren't quite so lucky with Aggie Land Outfitters, but at least we had that. The other piece of this design drawing that you are looking at is you can see these tan-colored areas. We are actually proposing that we have a completely separated bicycle and pedestrian level throughout the intersection. So you would be able, as a bicyclist or as a pedestrian, to go below grade, go under the railroad tracks, and then you could cross here and continue on, or you could come over here and cross and continue on. So we're trying to incorporate bicycle and pedestrian safety into all of the designs that we're doing. We're finding in our research that if you want to retain or recruit younger individuals to work at local businesses, there's actually a pretty strong movement for them to be able to circulate around by either walking or bicycling. And so it's become an important piece of everything that we do when we develop these plans. So what is everything going to look like? Well, 2020, we are going to begin to start a couple of projects, but not a lot of things going on in fiscal year 2020. There is a project on our books to begin looking at medians on Texas Avenue all the way from 21 to University Drive. I don't think we'll see any of those medians actually be constructed, but that red line that you see here is the realignment of Waco Street so that we can develop a signalized intersection at Waco Street with its intersection with 21. We're also doing bicycle and pedestrian improvements on Palisota. And there's also some improvements being made on Old Hearn Road. So that's kind of what this red diagram is doing. And then Welburn's a busy street and the roadbed is beginning to deteriorate. And so we're looking at doing some overlays on Welburn to improve that. It's not shown in these particular diagrams, but it is. So we'll talk about that in a second. So in 2021, the North Texas Avenue medians and phases will begin. They'll start up around 21 and work their way towards Villa Maria, and then eventually connect all the way down to University Drive. We are going to be adding some medians on George Bush Drive, and still maintaining the 2 lanes in each direction to improve safety on that particular road. And then, as you can see, we'll also begin the construction of the 2818 widening. Now, 2818 is an interesting road because right now we're using about 120 feet of the existing right-of-way, but TxDOT already owns 400 feet of existing right-of-way on 2818. So as the construction takes place on 2818, it will be outside the existing roadway in the additional 400 feet. And so the only disruption to current traffic will be when it's time to hook up the new sections and those kinds of things later on in the project, but we will still have full access to 2818 while it's under construction. The other thing that is going on is the city of College Station is funding a project where they're actually raising the intersection of Welburn and Holloman to take out that hump that you have as you're approaching Welburn from Holloman on the west side. They've had a couple of accidents there in recent years. We even had one vehicle push another vehicle in front of a railroad car, because they couldn't see and couldn't understand why the person was waiting on the hump. And so we'll be taking that out and making improvements to that. And that's in 2021. 2022, we continue on with the Texas Avenue medians. We also began the William Joel Bryan bike ped and traffic improvements that I showed you a little earlier. And 2818 continues its construction process outside the existing roadway. As we move into 2023, we call this locally kind of as a joke when we have Armageddon here in Bryan-College Station. We will have the Texas Avenue Medians project continuing on. We will have the William J. Bryan project continuing on. We will be finishing up the 2818 project, and we'll also be beginning the 6-laning of State Highway 6. So all of the major ways to move around Bryan-College Station will probably be under construction during 2023. Now, I caution on that because the pandemic has changed some of the funding scenarios that we are looking at. And so we're not sure if State Highway 6 will start in 2023 or it might slide back an additional year. But the intention is for it to begin in 2023. We then have in 2024 the finalization of the Texas Avenue median projects, the completion of the William Joel Bryan bike and traffic improvements, continuation of the State Highway 6 project, and the Bush-Welburn interchange project was intended to be done in 2024, but because of the pandemic and the funding issues, the Texas Transportation Commission decided that they would use their discretionary funding on a real small project called I-35 in downtown Austin, as opposed to the Bush-Welburn interchange. So trying to improve Interstate 35 between the river and 290 is a little bit higher priority for the commission than the Bush-Welburn interchange at this time. So we'll continue to pursue that funding. It is the #1 ranked project for the Bryan district, but we just didn't receive it in the most recent Unified Transportation Program update. In addition to everything that I've shown you before, we also have the University Drive project that is currently being studied. That is looking at taking 4 lanes of University Drive and putting them basically in a tunnel between College Avenue and Welburn Road, and then reducing the at-grade footprint to 1 lane in each direction with a lot of bicycle and pedestrian improvements. This particular photo that you're looking at here, you can see they even came up with the concept of putting a park here next to Hullabaloo dorm. And then you can see we have channelization to prevent mid-block crossings for the pedestrians. And then having the 1 lane in each direction allows for access to the businesses that are along University Drive. It's interesting, this project received so much attention that the Brazos County Commissioners formed a regional mobility authority to look at the potential for this project to take place, and if this project cannot take place, what we might do in place of it. That was the reason the Regional Mobility Authority was formed. However, the Regional Mobility Authority will be looking at ways that they can improve the transportation network throughout Brazos County. And so we are just now in the process of developing a strategic plan for the Regional Mobility Authority and looking at what are some of the other projects that they may be interested in. And I apologize for all of the technical difficulties. So if you'd like a copy of this presentation, I can either provide it to Chris, or you can email me at either one of those two email addresses, and I'll be happy to send you a copy in PDF because it is a fairly graphic intensive presentation. It probably wouldn't come through your email folder if I sent you the PowerPoint presentation. Because of the pandemic, my availability at my office has been curtailed somewhat because some of my staff members are high risk. And so we have more of a rotating schedule in the office now. So best way to reach me is by email, or you can leave me a voicemail message on my phone. And with that, I typically get a lot of questions, and so I thought I'd leave time for questions. So if you have questions, now's the time to ask them. And again, I apologize for the technical difficulties.
Well, thanks, Dan. I really appreciate it. There's a lot of great information. We do have a couple of questions. I have one right here. Are there any plans to improve east-west traffic and decrease the time to cross town? It currently takes 20 minutes to go 5 miles.
Yeah, we've looked at several different ways that we could improve east-west connections. However, they're all fairly well developed and landlocked. So one of the things that we are looking at pursuing is completing the rest of 2818 between Welburn and State Highway 6, like we did the Super Street on 2818 between Welburn and University Drive. That's the best corridor that we have that we could make the improvements on. The other ones are developed to the point where we would have to take all of our funding for about 30 years just to pay for the right-of-way acquisition of all the businesses that we would have to close in order to improve, say, Villa Maria or University Drive or any one of those roadways that goes east-west. It's one of those things where, in hindsight, we wish we had done something about that. And there's potential that this expressway concept for University Drive may help with that. But at this point in time, we haven't been able to identify a good location for an east-west high-speed route across Bryan-College Station.
Great. I'm not seeing any other comments, but we'll definitely get your PowerPoint shared with anybody who would like a copy of it. And we appreciate you taking the time to come and speak with us. I know it's a little bit of a different methodology, but I think it worked out extremely well. So I really appreciate you coming and taking the time to speak with us and share everything that's happening in BCS transportation over the next couple of years.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk with groups that are interested in transportation.
Well, with that, everybody, I want to thank y'all all for tuning in to our first virtual luncheon here. Our next luncheon we hope to have in person is scheduled for August 11th. Please check your emails for more details about that. And we hope to have another Howdy Hour the last Thursday of July, which would be July 30th, but notwithstanding COVID, so we'll see what happens there, and we'll make those decisions as we keep going. But I appreciate everybody for tuning in, and thank you again to Dan for coming to speak with us. I hope everybody has a blessed day. Thanks, and gig 'em.